When you look down from a high place, a thought may suddenly flash through your mind. What would happen if I jumped? This experience is so common that the French even gave it a name, the call of the void. Many people have been frightened by this thought. I clearly value my life, so why would I seem to have a suicidal impulse? But cognitive science gives the opposite answer. What you are feeling is not a real impulse at all. It is more like a misunderstanding caused by the brain's alarm system being a little too diligent. To understand that misunderstanding, we have to begin with the body's reaction in that half second. You stand somewhere high and look down. Notice this. Before you become aware of any thought, your body has already moved first. Your legs weaken, your center of gravity shifts backward, your hands grip the railing, your pupils dilate, and your heart speeds up. Every signal points to the same pattern: move away. In physiology, this is called defensive activation. It is driven directly by the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and it happens so fast that rational thought has no time to intervene. The problem appears in the next step. After the fear response begins to fade, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational analysis, starts working. It detects that the body has just gone through a wave of intense arousal, so it begins tracing the cause. What just happened, and why was I so scared? To answer that question, the brain rapidly simulates the worst-case scenario in the background. What if I had fallen just now? The simulation is so vivid that it produces an accompanying mental image: me falling. Then the misunderstanding happens. You take the image simulated by the brain and mistake it for a real impulse. You feel as if the thought of jumping flashed through your mind, but from beginning to end, you were only reading an automatically generated danger assessment report. The original title of that report should have been, "Here is the worst thing that could happen." But by the time it reaches conscious awareness, the title has been omitted, and only the image remains. In psychology, this phenomenon has a formal name: intrusive thoughts. It refers to unwanted thoughts or images that suddenly break in and often feel disturbing. Their extremely high rate of occurrence shows that this is a normal psychological phenomenon, not an abnormal one. Most adults have experienced at least one intrusive thought that troubled them. The content of an intrusive thought is usually not a reflection of desire, but a mirror of fear. A person standing at a height fears falling, so falling appears in the mind. New parents fear their baby getting hurt, so an image of letting go may flash through their minds. Kind people fear hurting others, so scenes of harm may suddenly appear. The more the content violates a person's values, the more it can actually prove how much those values matter to them. So why would the brain actively play this frightening little movie? Evolutionary psychology offers one explanation, called threat simulation theory. According to this theory, the brain maintains a threat prediction system that runs around the clock. Even in safe environments, it automatically rehearses potential dangers, helping us identify threats in advance and store possible responses. When you stand at a height, the depth information coming from vision conflicts with the flat, stable signals coming from touch. The threat system is activated, and it immediately generates a simulation of the consequences of falling. The purpose of this program is not to tempt you into acting. It is to make you afraid, make you step back, and make sure you never actually take that step. In other words, those images that make your heart jolt are a kind of psychological vaccine the brain gives you after confirming that you are safe. There is another variable that amplifies the effect. The famous white bear experiment in psychology showed that when people are told not to think about something, that thing becomes unusually active in the mind. The more you tell yourself, "Don't think about jumping," the clearer the image of jumping becomes. This does not mean your self-control is poor. It is simply how the brain processes negative instructions. The brain cannot directly execute the command, "Do not think about X." It has to activate X first, then try to delete it. As a result, activation almost always succeeds, while deletion often fails. By this point, we have explained where the thought comes from and why it has nothing to do with desire. But there is a deeper question. Could the feeling you describe as, "I wanted to jump just now," itself be something fabricated after the fact? In neuroscience, there is a distinction between the core self and the narrative self. The core self is the experiencer of this very moment. The narrative self is the screenwriter living in your mind, responsible for organizing everything that just happened into a story that makes sense. This screenwriter works extremely fast, but it has one fatal flaw. It always starts writing only after the event has already happened. The real sequence of events is this. The core self experiences fear, the body moves backward, and physiological arousal reaches a peak. A few hundred milliseconds later, the narrative self receives a summary of bodily data. Fast heartbeat, weak legs, just looking down. Then, with one broad stroke, it gives a simple and crude conclusion. This person wanted to jump. You accept this after-the-fact report as the fact itself, without realizing that the person writing the report was not even on the scene at the time. This means the whole experience may be a three-layered misunderstanding. First, the brain simulates a dangerous scenario, and you misread it as an impulse. Second, the white bear effect makes the thought clearer the more you try to suppress it. Third, the narrative self adds the label, "I really did have an impulse," after the fact, making you believe it completely. But the truth is simple from beginning to end. You were afraid, and you were afraid very thoroughly. Beyond the scientific consensus, there are also some bolder hypotheses worth mentioning. Some physicists, starting from the many worlds theory of quantum mechanics, have speculated that in some parallel universe you really did jump, and the feeling you have now is a cross-universe echo of consciousness. Some anthropologists believe it may be a genetic remnant of our primate ancestors' memories of falling during life in the trees. Freudian thinkers interpret it as a brief emergence of the death drive. None of these hypotheses currently has empirical support, but together they confirm one fact. Human curiosity about this kind of mental flash has lasted for more than a century. Returning to the original question, the fleeting thought of wanting to jump at a height is, in essence, an overprotective safety system. It is not a summons, it is an alarm. It is not a sign of wanting to die, it is evidence of wanting to live. Understanding this has practical meaning. The next time you stand somewhere high and that thought flashes again, you do not have to be frightened by it, and you do not have to doubt yourself. It is simply the brain telling you, in a slightly clumsy way, "I have already rehearsed the worst-case scenario for you. Now please step back and keep living safely." Of course, one boundary needs to be clearly drawn. Normal intrusive thoughts flash by, bringing fear and avoidance. If this kind of thought becomes persistent and specific, carries a sense of anticipation or relief, or even begins to affect your daily decisions, then it no longer belongs to the benign psychological range, and professional psychological assessment and help are needed. But that is a very small minority of cases. For most people, the sudden jolt at a height is simply the brain doing its duty and calling out, "Be careful."